Now we will consider the possibility of delaying the advent of the crisis, and we will examine the theoretical explanation for the process of inflationary recession, or stagflation, when the fractional reserve banking system initiates the processes of artificial credit expansion and the corresponding bubble forms. Then, after a varying period of time, alarm bells sound. The 6 effects we looked at are gradually triggered, and they stop the euphoria process with a financial crisis, and later a deep economic recession. Many times, when the first warning signs appear, as a rise in the price of productive factors, raw materials, consumer goods, etc., a crisis is not viewed as politically admissible. Things cannot go badly, and thus social pressure is applied on authorities, and even within central banks themselves, in an attempt to solve the problem by giving more alcohol to the patient, who is already beginning to feel the effects of the drinking binge in the form of a hangover. Historically, action has often been taken at the first sign that the whole process of artificial credit expansion is going to collapse, and further doses of credit expansion have been injected, and at a progressively increasing rate. Indeed, with this policy, it is possible to delay the advent of a crisis. But take note, this delay, this postponement of the arrival of the crisis can be achieved only at a great cost. For when the crisis does inevitably hit in the slightly more distant future, it will be much more severe, it will last much longer, and it will involve a much higher social cost. This is because the widespread process of malinvestment which takes place will be far more profound and extensive. I want to emphasize this point, because this is precisely what happened in the last crisis. In the 1990s, there was a tremendous process of credit expansion. These were the roaring Clinton years, and the expansion process inevitably distorted the productive structure, with widespread malinvestments around the world. They started coming to light in the year 2000 or early 2001, in which all the effects we have studied were triggered, and a process of financial crisis and economic recession began. Under normal circumstances, it would have been at that time that we would have had to tackle the restructuring of all the erroneous projects launched in the previous decade. But a historical accident put an end to the entire restructuring process. It was the September 2001 terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. At that time, the world's political and monetary authorities decided that, under such circumstances, the United States could not afford an economic recession. The pressure was brutal, and Alan Greenspan, then chairman of the Federal Reserve, did an about-face in his monetary policy, and interest rates, which had risen to 6%, were lowered to 1% over a few days. In other words, just when the economy was beginning to experience the effects of the recession and enter the healthy readjustment stage it involves, the readjustment was brutally halted by a massive injection of additional credit expansion, a dose increasing at a very rapid pace. Consequently, all of the readjustments which should have been made during that period were postponed. To the widespread malinvestments accumulated over the 90s were added, increasingly and systematically, new widespread malinvestments financed with credit expansion injected into the system at a very rapid pace, starting in 2001. The crisis and recession were postponed. The party was extended, so to speak, and lasted until 2007. But at what cost? Well, starting in 2007, despite the injections of credit expansion, the economic organism triggered the 6 effects we have studied, and with them, the severest financial crisis and economic recession to devastate the world since the Great Depression. If the effects are to be temporarily postponed, the injections of credit must also progressively increase so that economic agents are surprised by them and unable to predict the influence they will have. For if credit expansion stops or slows down, the 6 effects we have studied are triggered, along with the financial crisis and economic recession. And even if the process of credit expansion does not stop or slow down, even if it grows at a steady rate, to the extent that economic agents can predict it, the 6 effects still appear. And if this happens, a situation can arise in which all of the characteristics typical of a financial crisis and an economic recession are accompanied by a dramatic decrease in the purchasing power of the monetary unit, or if you prefer, an increase in prices. This, dear students, is the worst of worlds. The worst of worlds is one in which we have a profound financial crisis and a serious economic recession with high unemployment, like we have now, but also, and this is not present now, severe inflation, a significant rise in prices, or if you prefer, a great decrease in the purchasing power of the monetary unit. This combination of an economic recession and inflation is called from stagnation, flation, from inflation, stagflation, which in Spanish we will call recesión inflacionaria, inflationary recession. Today we are in the grip of a deep recession, but fortunately we have the euro and we are not suffering from stagflation, which is the worst of worlds, and into which we could fall if we now attempted to overcome the crisis with a progressively increasing injection of new credit expansion. Historically, there have been instances of stagflation or inflationary recessions. Think of the profound economic recession and high unemployment that marked the poorly named oil crisis of the 1970s, which was not really an oil crisis. It was the market's natural response to the assault of monetary and credit expansion stemming from the global, but particularly the American, financing of the Vietnam War. There was an environment of great monetary growth. I was young, but I followed the events closely. I was just becoming a teenager. It was a stage of deep economic recession and high levels of inflation, an inflationary recession which clashed with the thinking of macroeconomists in general, and Keynesians in particular, and which went a long way toward discarding the entire Keynesian toolbox of concepts.